right. Well, thank you everyone for joining me today at the Think Global conference and the International Trade Council's great event that they're putting on here. I think it's time to dive in, so I'll get started. My name is Brian Erickson. I'm with Cardwell Beach. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer and partner of a creative agency that is focused on delivering tangible results and adapting to change. And when we're talking about entering new markets, that is a situation where you have to adapt to change pretty quickly. There are also other situations that drive, as a change agent, drive you to adapt and be nimble. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of those today. COVID-19 and the global pandemic certainly being one of them. So we're going to look at some examples of big brands that we've spoken with, and we've done a formal sort of research project throughout the course of the pandemic as to how they have adapted and pivoted when circumstances change and how they've stayed true to their values. So when you're looking at making lightning fast strategic moves, and sometimes you want to, sometimes you have to, what are the tools that you need to have in place, or the foundations that you need to have in place to enable that sort of adaptation and change? And what we've seen and what our research has shown is that clear brand values really are one of the key drivers that enable you to pivot quickly and to adapt and to turn on a dime. So situations where you need to adapt fast and where you want to remain nimble in the face of rapid change, why would you focus on brand values, and what situations might call for that sort of tool in your tool set? So if your business is expanding into a new market, if you're weathering an unprecedented moment like COVID-19, if you're trying to localize your products in an area that you haven't previously had a strong presence, if you're addressing a new culture, a new demographic, a new audience, you should focus on your brand values if you're struggling to make that change effectively and rapidly. So in this presentation, we're going to break down what brand values are and how you can use them to do this. So brand values are principles that guide your priorities, actions, and corporate beliefs, right? And they affect different aspects of your business and really affect both internal, external, and strategic components. So on the marketing side, your core brand values really drive what sorts of marketing activities you engage in, the messaging that you bring to the table on the marketing side. And marketing is really a form of one-to-many communication, right? Sales is more of a one-to-one sort of communication. So there's definitely overlap in how your brand values affect your messaging to the masses, and also your messaging to individuals and the types of ways that you engage with them. So successful brand values allow you to adapt to changing conditions. I think at this point in the presentation, you get that message, right? But without reinventing the wheel. And how does it do that? So let's say you're encountering a new situation, right? There's a new or emerging business opportunity or challenge. You can put it through the test of, how does this line up with what I've already said I stand for as a brand and a company, and we've agreed on is important to us. And you can use those principles and that guiding light to help you make decisions really quickly. So, just very generally and broadly, you have a set of possible responses to a situation. You kind of line them up with what you've said you stand for and what's important to you as an organization, and see how they fit. And so let's look at how brand values can help a home goods manufacturing company entering a new or emerging market, right? So let's say you are manufacturing in Europe or in Asia, and you're expanding into the US, and you want to hit young adults, right? And what really resonates with audiences currently are hospitality, quality, and comfort. Well, partnering with universities for a welcome back to campus sort of promotion, where you're extending the brand value of hospitality, donating surplus goods to homeless youth nonprofits, and you're focusing on comfort, right? Those would be in line with the audience that you're trying to reach. Now, partnering with an Instagram influencer for a photo shoot and doing something flashy, well, would that really necessarily line up with hospitality, quality, and comfort? or partnering with a luxury hotel chain to feature goods and rooms, maybe, right? But I think it's less of a clear-cut sort of scenario than the first two options there. So looking at how we've done this in response to COVID-19 and some of the research that we've done throughout this, one of our core brand values is adaptability and helping brands really pivot in the face of ever-changing conditions. We believe very strongly that the world is evolving and shape-shifting at a pace that is really almost unmanageable in a lot of ways, and you can't plan for every situation, but you can adapt to every situation if you have the right processes and frameworks in place. And so what that spurred into action for us in early March of last year was, hey, we need to help people adapt to this uncertain time. Let's just kind of no egos, break down the walls, get the leading thinkers that are adapting to this in real time to talk about what they're doing, and try to just democratize that information in a way that other people could leverage and use. So some examples that came out of that, we talked to the Chief Marketing Officer, Melanie Hewitt at Serta Simmons, and she was talking about how comfort, they have a number of different brands that are really some of the longest and most lasting presences in the mattress and bedding market. They felt that this was a time that called for comfort, and so the Serta brand is really all about comfort. So they chose that brand specifically to launch a stay home, send beds program and donate beds to U.S. hospitals that were in need and had gone over capacity, especially in their ICUs at the early stages of the pandemic. And so, that was it was within, days to weeks of the pandemic onset that they were able to make that decision. And it was not a small financial investment by any means. And it really came from a selfless place, but it did line up with how they wanted the brand to be perceived, which was a brand that is there to comfort you. And, what is more comforting than a high quality bed in your time of need where you're not feeling well? And that was kind of the approach that they took there with that. And so this was a quote from Melanie. Right now, we're in a space where people really need comfort. When you think about someone who's ill, comfort is the number one thing you need. You need comfort, safety, and caring. And so that meant that the Serta brand was a perfect one to match up with. Now, had they not defined those values in advance of this situation, they wouldn't have been able to make that decision, or they would have maybe made a different decision that didn't necessarily tie what they were about to the situation at hand. So I think the critical piece was that they knew what the brand stood for in advance, and they were able to identify how that lined up with the world as they saw it today. Princess Cruises, Gordon Ho, the chief marketing officer at the time, where, obviously early in the pandemic, they had multiple ships that were trapped at sea. So, with the early COVID cases, they had to adapt very quickly, and they were under intense scrutiny very early on in the pandemic, where it wasn't really, everybody had it. It was just a few, pieces of the world were really suffering from this, and cruise ships were, in the media spotlight. So at the time, they had canceled basically all of their cruises, and, even to this day, really haven't gotten that back. But how do you maintain a brand under that sort of circumstance? You need to look at, what do you provide? You can't provide the actual service that you provide. People can't go on a cruise anymore at all, right? But what does your brand stand for, and how can you stay in touch with them in a way that engages them and delivers the value that you had already, kind of established in their minds? And I think people are hungry for connections and community. It makes us who we are, right? They knew, again, very quickly that the reason people went on cruises in the first place with them was the community aspect. And so they quickly pivoted to, sharing food and drink recipes. I personally suggested a Zoom midnight buffet that you run in their home. They didn't like that one. But I would have liked that one. But, I think creating that community in a different way, and certainly no substitute for an actual vacation, but pivoting quickly to just create a positive out of whatever they had to work with at the time was possible because they knew what they stood for and what people really were purchasing. They weren't purchasing a cruise, they were purchasing a communal experience that they shared with other people, and you could create that in other ways even if it's not exactly the same. And some examples here of some of the content that they created. Princess at Home was a formal program that was created at that time where you actually had aspects of the cruise experience, and that has continued to evolve. But you can see 26,000 views in the first couple days that it was launched there. Definitely a success from a branding standpoint, even if the service is not something that can be actively utilized in a pandemic. Markham LLP, so public accounting firm and strategic advisors, key brand value, trusted advice. They knew that people wanted answers, and no matter what is going on, they have high-level executives that are coming to them asking for really certainty in the face of great uncertainty. So similar to how we've approached the situation, providing resources, they have looked at the financial aspects, tried to provide ongoing guidance for the government stimulus and just the very rapidly changing landscape with Paycheck Protection Program in the early days, and just providing resources free of charge to demonstrate that they had a strong handle on a rapidly evolving situation that really nobody knew what was going to happen. They had researched thoroughly, and they were an authority in that space. So Bruce, the CMO at Markham, said, "We want people to ask Markham." So in that spirit, when everything went haywire and we found ourselves in the midst of a crisis, we knew that people in crisis want one thing, maybe even above all others, which is just answers, right? You don't want theory, you don't want speculation. I want the answer. And that has really helped them just solidify that trusted advisor role as a public accounting firm and really as a strategic advisory consulting firm. We have the answers, and that comes from confidence based in research and just putting in the work. So they've done a great job at identifying what it is that people come to them for and making sure that as things change, they adapt to that situation. So one of our clients, My3Square, who we helped adapt to this situation, is a meal support sessions and a counseling center for eating disorders. And so during this time, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, where folks that were coming in person to attend sessions with them and working with counselors one-on-one to get through difficult eating disorder situations, had no resources and no support group to deal with a difficult problem. And so compassion, being one of My3Square's core pillars, was really important, and a constant presence that demonstrated compassion was how we approached this challenge specifically. So they launched a meet and eat together daily session where they would host basically an interview with a guest and eat lunch. And the idea was that you were supposed to eat lunch as well and make sure that you didn't skip a meal just because you were in isolation and didn't have a support group. That was part of your daily life previous to this. So that was a tremendous success. Tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people tuned in over the course of the first few months where they were running that series. And the idea was to pass no judgment, right? We're just sitting here and we're eating lunch and we're talking about things that are related to eating disorders, and we're talking about things that are totally unrelated to eating disorders. And the idea is that let's take your mind off of the fact that you have to sit down by yourself in a room with nobody in it and stare down a plate of food that you're having an issue with. And smashing success, I would say, in terms of the support and guidance that was provided there, and really solidified the compassionate element of the My3Square brand. So again, coming back to the way that we've used our core brand value of having no ego about just get it done, be adaptable, and take a disciplined approach to dealing with the current world, even as chaotic as it is. Marketingaftercovid.com was the initiative that we've really championed throughout this pandemic, and again, looking at how do you adapt and stay nimble in the face of change. And this is something where we've had, I think at this point, just recorded one of these today, maybe 45 different CMOs weigh in and provide advice for people who are in a marketing role right now and have no idea what to do, and people who have lost their jobs and are now on the hunt for an industry transition or a new sort of role that they can hang their hat on, and how do you adapt to the current world and pick yourself up and keep moving. So how do you create a values framework that allows you to pivot, like the examples that we just looked at, right? So you see the application of it, and you see how it comes to life in a real situation. But if you're entering a new market, how do you use brand values and these principles to help you take what people already like about you, right? Because your values are an articulation of what works. They're not, I don't think you can just invent a series of brand values. I think they have to really kind of be pulled out of you, for lack of a better way to put it. Is there has to be something that the team is passionate about, that the reason that the brand exists, right? And you have to try to understand what those are, and what aspects of them resonate with the world. And so this first piece of brand values is obviously the core of what you're going to do, but it works together with a number of other pieces to act as a framework that guides decision making and allows you to pivot quickly, right? So you have your brand values, whether for like Cardboard Beach, it's adaptability and no egos and discipline, right? Or whether it's community for Princess Cruises. Whatever those brand values are that you define, pick the ones that are truest to you and that really kind of drive the way that you approach business, and use those brand values to then look at your brand position in the marketplace. And that is something as it relates to your competitors, right? Because your brand values don't operate in a vacuum. They are relative to all of the other choices that somebody has in the market. So when you're defining your brand values, you're really looking inward. When you're defining your brand position, you're looking outward, and you're looking at how what you've discovered inward translates to the world that you're looking at today. And that can shift. And I think that's an important piece, especially when you're entering a new market, is realizing that, let's say, community is really what you're going after, right? There may be a way to position that in your, kind of core market geographically that's different from the way that you position community in a different market, right? But that core value of community can remain constant. So I would just really want to emphasize that while your values don't change, your position is dictated by the other external factors that you don't have as much control over. Because what you want to do is you want to stand out, and you want to be not just a choice, but the choice, and the choice for a specific group of people. So you have to find a position, maybe it's related to community, that isn't taken yet. Is it community in times of crisis? Is it community in times of celebration? Is it community in just everyday life, right? And making community a part of how you go throughout the experience that we all go through, right? Is it a special occasion, or is it an everyday thing, right? Those are different positions that you can own, but community is a part of that regardless of how you own it. And that can shift based on who you're talking to. Very important. The next piece is your mission, right? So you've got your position and you've got your values, but how do you, how do you create community in everyday life? Or how do you articulate the fact that you want to create community in everyday life, more importantly, right? It's a high level goal that is stated and articulated internally, right? It's not external facing language at this point. When you're focusing on a mission, it can be external language, but I think it's more of the gut check, the synopsis, the summary of what you're trying to accomplish, and who you're trying to accomplish it for, and how you're doing that, right? So it's a short snapshot of, we want to create community for people through, celebration of everyday life, after work, at home, at school. We want to be just kind of everyday community builders, and that's our value, right? Now, what it doesn't do is it doesn't take into account your brand's strategy. And so strategy is really the tip of the spear here, where, the rubber meets the road and these brand values come to life. And if you move from left to right here, from brand values to brand position and mission, to the right all the way to brand strategy, strategy meets tactics. And strategy needs to be nimble, and strategy needs to change. As much as brand values are a constant and stay in place and, kind of weather the storm for a longer period of time, and as much as your brand value or your brand position is durable, as, it's going to change over time as new competitors enter the market and they catch on to what you're doing and things like that, right? You may be looking at brand values that last you 10 years, 50 years, 100 years or more, right? A brand position may last you, that may be a 3 to 5 year sort of play, depending on how things evolve. And your mission statement may be a similar sort of shelf life. Your brand strategy may change every quarter, or, maybe once a year you revisit your brand strategy, and which tactics make up that strategy are definitely part of it. New situations that you're looking into, or that you're facing, should adapt and be nimble. This is the piece that should change, and in the face of change, you should reconsider all the time. What is your marketing mix? How much are you spending on performance marketing that's generating, a tangible return on investment next month, versus brand marketing that is creating awareness and just priming people who might not be in market just yet, but will be in the future, right? That's a component of your brand strategy. Is how are you budgeting? What tactics are you using? What sort of specific campaign language and messaging language are you bringing to the market? So very important that all of these pieces work together and interlock, as you see here, but they definitely change at different rates, and this is the piece that is meant to be most nimble. So in terms of, a values framework that we look at very, very often and frequently, right? Brand values all the way on the left. Discipline is a core brand value, and the components of discipline to us are having a high degree of empathy, not having an ego, and remaining adaptable. How that comes to life in a position for a marketing agency is that we are a flat organization, no egos, right? Focused on results and being adaptable to get those results. And our mission is to make life easier for our clients and better for consumers by creating marketing that adds value and doesn't just, not just telling about your brand, but actually the marketing itself should be valuable, even if you never experience the product or service. That's our view on it, because we have a deep empathy for the customer. And the way that came to life strategically during COVID has been no nonsense advice for all, right? Let's show people what they should be doing to continue to weather the storm, even in rapidly changing conditions that nobody has faced before. Let's democratize that information, whether you're the chief marketing officer of Serta Simmons or Princess Cruises, or a solopreneur who found themselves out of a job and is starting an upstart. We are all moving forward, and there are things that are universal that we can apply there. So again, just digging into Cardwell Beach's brand values in action, marketers need guidance to navigate the uncertainty of the COVID-19 pandemic. Discipline, empathy, no egos, adaptability as a framework, creating free downloadable guides for marketing in the COVID-19 era, curating best practices from industry leaders during COVID-19 are very in line with those core brand values. Maybe again, doing a photo shoot with influencers and celebrating, saying everything's great for us is not necessarily in line with an empathetic sort of view, but maybe for some brands that would make sense. Writing a COVID-19 marketing guide and placing it behind a paywall wouldn't be very empathetic either. And, looking at high-level chief marketing officers from major global brands and just only sharing the information that they provided with us to similar audiences wouldn't democratize information in the way that we value and we feel is important. So what I'll say is, discipline creates certainty is something that we stand for. Create what's important to you and fly it on your flag out in front of the office or virtually. I think it's something to be proud of. Your visuals, your messaging, the way that you kind of view the world should be something that your marketing communicates. And whether you are adapting to a pandemic or you are adapting to a new market and to a new geography, you want to be able to have something that stays true to who you are, yet adapts and is nimble to to drive the maximum success and maximum results in a different sort of situation. So brand values are really the starting place of how you're going to do that. And it takes discipline to do that. So thank you so much for taking the time. Brian Erickson, Chief Strategy Officer at Cardwell Beach Think Global Conference, has been a great event. I hope you're all having an awesome time. And looking forward to talking with everyone at the virtual booth and answering any questions that you have. So thanks very much for listening and watching here, and I look forward to connecting. Hope to talk with you soon, and feel free to reach out to us if you have any other questions after this event at cardwellbeach.com. We're always happy to chat, and you can find me on LinkedIn, Brian Erickson, Chief Strategy Officer at Cardwell Beach. Thanks so much.